Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our event tonight. My name is Omalayo Ojo. I'm the community manager for the Young African Professionals Network here in DC, and we are a partner with Politics and Prose for this wonderful book reading for tonight. So welcome. We're very excited to have you here, and thank you for having us as a partner today. So I would just like to take a few minutes to quickly introduce the Young African Professionals. So we are a nonprofit professional organization with over 10,000 members in the DMV and wider DC area, and we provide professional development opportunities to bolster career development, advancement, and growth for the young African professionals in the DC area. So that means, for example, myself, I'm from Southern Maryland actually, but I come here often for YAP events because it just does a lot to create a network, ensure that I'm networking with people ahead of me, and then also just meeting lovely people and then being connected to the different conversations happening that young African professionals should be aware of. And so we have a membership platform. We are currently moving onto an app where people, so conversations that we're having here today can continue on our app and on our various social media platforms, which are YAP DC, YAPDC, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, of course. So I just wanted to welcome you all again tonight. And for the YAP members that are here tonight, thank you and enjoy our lovely book event tonight. Thank you.
All right, so now we'll get started with the event. So I'm very pleased to introduce Abdi Nor Iftin to Politics and Prose. Iftin currently lives in Maine, where he works as an interpreter for Somalis who have immigrated to the States. He is studying political science at the University of Southern Maine, and he plays soccer every Saturday in a melting pot league of Americans and immigrants from around the world. In Call Me American, Abdi describes how he first fell in love with America, learning English by listening to pop music by Michael Jackson and watching action films starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. His love of American culture led to his nickname, Abdi American. However, when radical Islamist group al-Shabaab rose to power, being Abdi American was dangerous. Abdi fled to Kenya as a refugee and, in a stroke of luck, won entrance to the United States in the annual visa lottery. Despite a trying, complicated journey, Abdi is now a proud citizen on the path to citizenship. Proud resident on the path to citizenship. And his story is a potent reminder of why America still beckons to those looking to make a better life. Publishers Weekly describes Call Me American as a wrenching yet hopeful biography. Iftin's extraordinary saga is not just a journey of self-advancement, but a quest to break free from ethnic and sectarian hatreds. Now, please join me in welcoming Abdi Nor Iftin.
Of course, I play soccer, except when it's snowing in Maine, because you can't play it. Hello. So, well, thanks for having me. It's beautiful. Before I get into the book, Call Me American, it seems like people are so much interested in this American Life episode about Abdi and the Golden Ticket. How many of you heard this American Life episode, Abdi and the Golden Ticket? Oh, wow. So that guy is coming. He's out there. He's going to be coming soon. That's me. Sorry. This is the... I've been introduced to these American jokes. Honestly, sometimes call it sarcasm. So something happened today, and it was the travel ban. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because somehow I feel like my book, Call Me American, kind of is a counter narrative to what happened today. So I would like to ask you to take for a minute and think about 6 things that I'm going to mention, and then see what you guys think. What would you think if you were a combination of a Muslim, a person of color, a Somali, an immigrant, a refugee, a diversity lottery winner? Yeah, it's a things that you can hear in the news. And being the combination of those things in one person is not really easy. So that's who I am. It's a lot of things. I've never expected this to probably be happening in the United States. But the funny thing is, my book's title is not Call Me a Somali. It's not Call Me a Muslim. It's not Call Me a Diversity Lottery winner. It's not Call Me a Refugee. It's not Call Me an Immigrant. It's Call Me American. And the idea of America, the democracy, the tolerance, the notion of America has actually saved my life. And I would like to tell you why. You probably haven't read the book yet because it's just out for a few days only. I was out there somewhere in the world, 9,000 miles from the United States. And I was in midst of this confusion as a child where a war erupts at the age of 5. And then I was just trailing behind my mother all over the place. We wandered in the wilderness, in the bushes for a while. And eventually we came back to the city, Mogadishu. And it had a name. It was called the Ocean City. And then later they nicknamed it the most dangerous city in the world before anything happened in Syria or Yemen or anywhere else. But unfortunately, it was not on the news. You couldn't hear that until one day, I believe, New York Times or Washington Post had published a picture of a young boy, very thin, very malnourished, kind of dying with famine and hunger and war that was happening. And then the US decided to intervene and they sent troops on the ground. So I was right there. I was like that boy. And I don't want to give out everything in the book, but the Marines arrive, and for the first time at the age of 7, I come face to face with these guys in their uniforms and their guns. But the guns are not pointed in my face. Guns are pointed away from my face. And this was amazing. It couldn't happen. For those of you who have lived through a civil war, you totally understand what a militia looks like and how they thrive, harassing and torturing and creating violence. But that was totally something new to me. And however, a war happens, the Marines leave, and then I decide to feel like, or have a dream, or have a feeling where I wanted to be like them. So, I'm not trying to take you away from what happened today. I still want to stay and tell you my feelings about it. My feeling is the travel ban is an encouragement and a happiness and a win and a gift to groups like ISIS or al-Shabaab or Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda. And I will tell you why. So the travel ban is banning this specific group of people from coming these countries, including Somalia, and I believe Syria, and I believe Yemen. So what's happening in these countries? These guys are thriving. Islamists are thriving. The reason they're thriving is because they're taking advantage of the weak. Everyone is poor. Everyone is refugee, displaced, but they don't have anything else to do. And my story is one thing that saved my life was the hope, the dream, and the understanding of a life outside of what I was living at the time, which actually was America. And if you have that kind of passion where you feel like something else is out there that's going to welcome you, that's going to be to accept you as who you are, you don't have to live the reality at the time where like you don't have to carry a gun and fight for any militia. So as we speak today, specifically what happened today on the media, it kind of takes me back to my teenage days, and it gets me in that specific moment where I feel like what if I didn't learn English from watching movies? What if Arnold Schwarzenegger was not there? What if these action movies weren't there? What if or what if those existed, but then they could tell you you're not allowed to go live in this life? I think, the other option that I had at the time as a teenager, and realizing that learning English is not going to help, so I would definitely end up in the hands of the recruiters, which they have very good speakers, and they could easily recruit you or hire you in their things, and they have so many things to tell you, and that's what they were doing at the time. However, I ignored it, and I totally refused to do that, even though my mother was arguing with me, and there she wanted me to go one. You will read that in the book. She wanted me to go one way, which was like, there's only one way out, and I feel like whatever is happening is God is punishing us because we were not faithful enough for our culture, for our religion, and everything else. And I somehow protested, and I said, I don't believe so. I mean, you can go somewhere else and live a happy life. So what's happening today is a win for those type of people to be able to tell the youth that, you know what, I told you this. America is an enemy of Islam, and they're not going to accept you in their countries. So forget about that, and we're doing this. And they can hire and recruit you. This happened practically when my brother and I, for those of you who heard This American Life, we were stuck in this apartment, and the Kenyan police somehow unleashed all their anger and frustration upon the Somali refugees living in this small neighborhood in the eastern Nairobi, when a group of Islamists from Somalia purposefully attacked a mall and killed almost 70 people. And the main reason was to not actually kill those people, but it was to set the government of Kenya against the refugees, and they were successful in doing that. And then what happened after that? You heard everything on the radio. They were trying to get all these poor, vulnerable refugees, out of the country. And somehow they couldn't do that, even though some refugees were voluntarily trying to get out. They were not prepared for it. They didn't have flights or ships or anything that could carry all of these people, thousands of people. So what did they do? It was, I call it a concentration camp. They used one of the soccer fields in Nairobi where they put all these thousands of refugees crowded, and some women were pregnant, gave birth in the middle of that craziness. And this was specifically a tough time for me, because that's when I applied for the U.S. green card lottery, and I was accepted. And I had to go through some process, including interviews and putting together some paperwork. And this has happened, and everyone was disappointed. When I tried to go out to get these papers, the most closest person in my life was my brother, who always told me, go ahead, do it, don't ever give up. At this moment, actually thought that enough was enough, and he told me, don't do it. This is not gonna happen. So I accepted the reality that they either have to send you to the concentration camp or go back to Somalia. And he said it specifically because it was 2 months until we were not able to step outside of the apartment. And we were out of food, out of water, and we were starving ourselves to death. And then I told my brother, I said, America's my last hope. If this does not happen, it's not gonna happen ever again. Because this was a immigration lottery. It was not a non-immigration lottery. A non-immigrant lottery is like if you apply for a student visa, which I did. And then when I went for my interview, they laughed. And they said, you're a refugee, and this non-immigrant visa actually means if you go to the United States and finish your studies, you're gonna have to come back. But he said, tell me one place in the world where you feel welcome, that you can come back. And I said, it doesn't exist. If I go to the US, that's the only place where I feel welcome. And that's the only place where I have to stay for the rest of my life. And he said, well, in this case, I'm not going to approve your visa. And he was right. And I was not disappointed. I totally understood. But the lottery was different. The lottery was an immigrant visa, which means you don't have to come back. You go to the US, you get your green card, and you stay there for the rest of your life. The difference, though, was I wasn't considered as a refugee coming to the United States with the diversity visa lottery. So I haven't received a counseling for trauma or PTSD or anything. So I was considered as one of those 50,000 people who received their visas that specific year in 2014, who arrived in the US with me in different places, including people from Canada, United Kingdom, countries in Europe, countries in Asia, countries in Africa, countries in Southern America. So what does this tell you? That's exactly America. That's what makes America great again. We're talking about 15 million people every year desperately trying to apply for the diversity visa lottery. And once they win or get selected, the process is easy for some countries. Like if you're in the United Kingdom or in Canada and you get selected, the process is pretty much easy. You have to show a proof that you have finished high school and a short interview and you get accepted. But I was part of these 15 million people at the time that had played the lottery, was accepted, or had been selected. But the process of going for the interview at the time was the most difficult, treacherous journey that I've ever been. And you heard that on This American Life. So why was it difficult? It's it's easy. If you look at it in Somalia had a period of whiteness for the world, not for us. So what 1993 or 94, when the U.S. Marines withdrew from Somalia, they turned their backs against everything that was happening in Somalia. There was no Islamist. There was no Al-Qaeda or ISIS or al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, but there were militias fighting in tribes. And then in this case, to the world, it was just a quiet place. They didn't care what was happening to the ordinary people like myself. So my book talks about exactly what happened within this period that you guys have not been able to see on the television or on the radio. And what happened? So it's a warlord rule. Like they are there, the militias are there. But then the good thing was we had the freedom to do what we needed to do. And that's when I started running around, going to the movies and picking up some English words and trying to push myself, far away from the culture. Our culture dictates sometimes the way we live as children, and our parents are trying to guide us. So I was kicked out of the house and living on the streets, but doing some hip hop dancing, walking all over the place, and building up some gang, a group of friends. And then I told them the best thing we could do, the job we could do, is to visit houses that have weddings, and we could dance and we can make some money. That's who I was. And then what happened? Out of this craziness, they called me American. Abdi American. I was so happy with that. I said, great. Wow, that's a good name. So keep calling me Abdi American. And I was proud of it. I was really, really so proud of it. I had a girlfriend. My girlfriend's dad hated me. I was the only idiot that he hated in town because I was this guy they called American, and he didn't like that. So in this case, I could only go around the house and come to the window and talk to her briefly and run away. That was the life I was living in at the time. By 2006, the quietness I was talking about was interrupted by the arrival of al-Shabaab. And then what did they do? They whipped me so bad for going to the beach with a girl. They warned me of the nickname that I had. They tried to recruit me several times. I went into hiding. And the people that were my friends in the same neighborhood were easily recruited into this Islamist group. And they were part of the team that was actually trying to find me anywhere. So one day I could hide in the house, another day I could go into the next, so they could never find me. So I was spending every night a different place. Until I was able to do something, which was tell my story. And the reason I did this was because you couldn't hear anything else coming out of Somalia. The only thing they did was they created a movie called Black Hawk Down, which some of you guys have seen it. And it does not tell the whole story. It just tells you the Marines landing and getting into militias, and then they leave. That's it. But I just want to show you the life that existed at the time before anything happened in 2006. How life had been, how we could do things and out on the streets. And then, the the conflict gets really, really, really bad by 2008 when America sponsors African troops and they land on the ground and they get into a fight with the militias, and militias are losing arms, and they're fighters so many of them are really killed in airstrikes, tanks, and all of this, and they were just recruiting people. They needed people, and I was in this limbo where I felt like this was happening. They either gonna find you, or what could you do? Nothing else. I had no other option at the time to get myself out or escape this situation except one route, which was tell my story to the world. So I started speaking to America by recording myself on a cell phone. But before that happened, I met this American journalist who was hiding himself in the trunk of a car, running all over Mogadishu, meeting militias. And then I saw him because he was taking pictures. And I walked up to him, and his bodyguards walked up to me, and they said, "We're going to shoot you. Get away." And then as we were arguing, he comes up and he says, "Let him in." So I started talking to him for 3 hours. He puts my story together, publishes it in a newspaper, and NPR finds out about it, and they say, "Will you be our man on the ground?" Wow, this guy who just learned English from movies and becoming a reporter. And I said, "I will think about it." And I talked to my mother. I whispered into her because it's not something that you could say out loud. And she said, "Hell no. Don't even try that." My brother was in a refugee camp in Kenya for 9 years. And he emailed back and he said, "Go ahead and do it. Because what have you got to lose? Nothing." And I said, "Great. Okay, that's all I needed." So I needed that push. I started recording myself in a cell phone. And then the stories went out to the US. And then what happens? The Americans listen. And there's this stranger, a woman in Maine, writes me a long email, and the email's title was "Excruciating, Gorgeous, and Painful." And I read that several times to figure out what she was talking about. And she went to Afghanistan. Her name is Sharon McDonald. She went to Afghanistan, and she has a son who's 20 years old at the time. And she compares me to what she had seen in Afghanistan. And she says, "Not many people know about this, but I somehow feel exactly what you're going through. So in this case, I'm here to help. What can I do?" And I said, "Get me out of here." Within 5 days, she put together a team that composes of 8 people called Team Abdi. So Team Abdi gets me out of Somalia. I come to Kenya, join my brother, and that's when life has that's a different chapter in my life again. It's like you're no longer a displaced person in your own country, so you're officially a refugee. And this refugee center in Kenya, they don't even ask me when I was born. They just put down January 1 because every refugee was born in January 1 according to them. Even though I tried to come up with my own birthday, I told them June 20th, please. And then when the paper came out, it said 1/1. And I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Well, you're like everybody else. Every refugee was born on January 1. I accept it. I was just sticking with it. And the lottery comes, I win the lottery, and I end up in Maine. And I will tell you a little funny story in Maine. I land in Boston, right? And I was wondering if the gravity in the US felt different. So I was walking like the guy on the moon. But everything felt normal. I didn't trip. I didn't fall. So I walked into Logan, and then you see all this breaking news. Michael Brown was shot and killed in Missouri. Well, I proceeded. I was like, whatever, this is America, I don't know if that's a movie. And then the officer, immigration officer, gives me a form. I have to fill out the form, and the form says, "Am I Caucasian, Black?" Whatever is in there, Asian, whatever. And I was like wondering, who am I? Seriously. Who am I in this list? I've never identified myself as Black. You agree with me? It's like funny to just, it's funny to come from somewhere where you identify yourself with your tribe because everybody else looks like you. Come into a different place where you have to identify yourself with with the skin, the color of your skin. And she helped me put Black in there, and she was just somehow wondering, what's wrong with this guy? In her mind. So the family drives us up from Maine and picks me up from Boston, and we are on the road 95. For those of you who know the road that links Maine and and Massachusetts. And I'm like, what's going on here? It's night. It's so dark. You can't see anything. And I'm wondering, where are these skyscrapers? What's going on here? We end up going to the house, and then I wake up early in the morning. I look through the window, and all I can see is deer, turkey, the horse, chickens. Well, the family has a barn, and they have a farm. And that's all I can see. I was like, this looks like the Walking Dead movie kind of thing. Yeah, I came out, I was running around, just, being, of course, a mix of happiness and shock. And the family take me around to the neighborhood, and we knock at doors, and they say, he's with us, don't call 911. This was when Michael Brown was shot and killed a day before. And then this was the story that was all over the place in 2014. And the Black Lives Matter just started. And it was going all over the place. And I have no connection with all of this. So I'm this guy who came here through all of this craziness that happened in my life. And all I needed was peace. And then they got me into something else where I have to think about my own safety. And I was in Yarmouth, Maine. Zero diversity. I didn't see anybody who looks like me. I'm not driving. Everyone is driving in the area, and there's no bus services. There's no train. And they said, we're going to get you a bike so you can bike around. That's what I did. I was biking around for a while in Maine. And eventually I said, everything looks difficult. You got so much food in the refrigerator, but I don't even know how, why you need all that food. And you know what I'm talking about, the life. So, however, it was a gift to live in this part of the world where there was the Somali community that I got connected with, and there was this sponsoring community that I stayed with, who actually got me introduced to Thanksgiving, how to eat apple pies, and actually how to cook them, and steaks, hamburgers, and then Christmas, of course, yeah. They got to let me do the wrapping. The first one was a little horrible. I wasn't sure. So they were doing it for me. And I'm like, what's the gift? The gift is for someone, you don't have to show them. So I got all the things and I spread them all over the place. I said, you need to show me how to wrap these things. This is for you. And you're like, no, don't say that. Wrap it and then write the name. And that's how it works. Okay. And then, so that was the first year. That was the introduction, and everything else went okay. Next few times. So I lived with a group of Somalis in one apartment in Portland, Maine, and we have been, I have received the greatest freedom in the entire world, where I was able to go exercise my faith. We could go to the mosque anytime, any day, and nobody was going to shoot me in the head, or there was no road blockade, and the cops were not after me. So it was amazing. That kind of feeling, privilege that you guys have taken for granted, the extended human rights, the peace, the stability, all of that to me was just really wonderful. And This American Life airs my story, and then thousands of people reach out and they say, wow, first of all, I didn't know about this diversity lottery thing, but it seems like people who are not in the US have their eyes in the US and they know every way to come to this country. They figure their ways out. And the main reason is not to come here and steal something or take something away from your land or from yourselves and go back to our countries and invest. I think majority of these people are coming here to be part of it, to contribute, to give, and also, most importantly, to accept. And that's what makes it wonderful. Do you guys, who likes salad? You guys eat salad? So salad is a combination of so many different things, right? Taste is good. So that's exactly what I think multicultural actually means. A different ingredient coming into one thing, and then it tastes pretty good. So America should be like that. And it, of course, was. And that's how I actually, I believe, come here, even though it was a struggle. But I came here and reunited myself with some Africans that I would never be able to meet. In Kenya, I've never met a South African or Rwandan or Ghanaian. But now we play soccer with at least 23 countries from Africa and introducing myself. And it's just amazing to have all of these wonderful friends and say like, oh, my friend, my brother from Africa, nice to meet you here. Because that America brought us all together. And then we talk to each other, what do you do? And everything seems like it's doing a great job. For those who don't speak English, or, at least no one sleeps. No one takes welfare, as far as I know, except if you're disabled or anything. But these are hardworking people. And we're out there in Maine, and we know each other. And we come together in the evenings when everybody gets out of work. And we play soccer and hang out and do fun things. And then we go back to our lives. So I hope you guys will read this, Call Me American. It's an interesting book. Especially for those of you who will follow in the, who heard this American Life episode of Abdi and the Golden Ticket. So the book has details from the beginning to the end. And please don't think that I'm disappointed with America. It's not true. I have the right to be disappointed with whoever is running this country, the White House. But the good thing is he's not the king. So I'm hopeful he's going to be leaving. And this administration is going to be gone. So it would be bad if I was living in Saudi Arabia by now, because I know that guy's not going to go anywhere. So that's the good thing about this country, right? But we're fighting. We're doing what we can. I know I only have a green card right now, which means I can go anywhere and come back. I'm not illegal, but at the same time, I'm really scared. And I never thought this would have happened in the United States. I never thought that I would be scared. Well, 2015, before this president arrived, I went into Canada 3 times just for fun. Drive across Quebec, and then drive all over to Niagara Falls, and then go to the other side. It was fun, and then come back. Nothing happens. I show my green card. Oh, welcome, And so I felt like home. Now, I have a feeling that when I drive, this ICE thing going on in the area, and all of that, they could do anything. Or, worse than that, the Twitter rockets that happen every day from the president. He can wake up tomorrow and say like, oh, all the green card holders from these 7 countries, we can reconsider your case and feel, for those of you, we can throw you out of the country. He can say. So it's dangerous. It's, unpredictable. But that's not gonna, I've been through a lot. I've been through tougher than this. But to me, this is the dead end. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not crossing into Canada. I'm not going to Alaska and then cross into Russia. I'm not going to do that. This is home, and I'm going to stay here, and I will fight for it. Now let's open to the public for questions. One more year. Okay. Yeah. One more year. Yes, sir. So I will answer that question. The transcript was they just needed to deny my case, basically. And the transcript wasn't signed, but I got it from the school. And they were just looking for something that they could tell me to hold on, we're going to put you on administrative processing. And then diversity lottery expires in September. So if this was around July, and then September was around around the corner. And when it gets to September, and they will say, oh, the whole thing expired, so you have to reapply again. So that's what they were trying to do, just push me to the deadline. And because they were not quite sure. Somalia was part of the countries that the U.S. has considered as terrorist haven, where Islamists run everything. And they couldn't trust a young man who is from Somalia just out of nowhere and then go to the United States. So they were basically thinking automatically to eliminate everybody, like that, unless you're a family, unless you're, have wives and kids and like that. So I was in this limbo. And I think they were just trying to deny me, unless the BBC guy, my friend Leo, called and said, we're working with him. We're doing this documentary with him. So are you guys gonna, approve his case or no? And then that's, I think, when they thought, okay, so he's not what we think, and let's approve his visa. So it was, it was determination plus some luck. That's why I'm here.
My wife and I were in the Peace Corps in Somalia in 66, 68, and I went back in 93 as part of Operation Restore Hope. And as you've described in your book, I mean, the destruction was just total. But it wasn't only physical, it was all the archives, all the history, all the museum pieces. So to what extent do you think it's possible for young Somalis like yourself to reconstruct for the new generation of Somalis living in the diaspora the history and the culture and the richness of Somalia?
Oh, that's a very good question, and I'm part of those who haven't seen all this beautiful infrastructure that our country had. And I remember my mom talking about when she first came to Mogadishu, the statues that she could see in the roundabouts in Mogadishu. But I haven't. I wasn't, lucky enough to remember either if I had seen that or not. But the only thing that I saw was the structure that's completely demolished, and then I could, that's where it was. But I think that question would be, when will Somalia be ever peaceful? Because that's when we can reconstruct our identity, the things that we have lost in the war, including all of these statues and monuments that we had in Somalia. And then if you look at it, everybody's hopeful. Somalis are hopeful, and they think that something is going to come back sometime soon. By 2011, when I was in Kenya as a refugee, I thought that by 2018, Somalia is going to be peaceful. And now we're going on a dark path as well, because things that don't seem like they're happening. So it's easy to start a war, but it probably takes generations to rebuild and recover from that. And unfortunately, Iraq had a war pretty short, 2003. And then now they're rebuilding it. Things are returning back to normal. But I feel like somehow the world isn't paying attention to Somalia. They are not interested at some point, unless it's militarily. Like the U.S. still has some bases, boots on the ground, drones that are flying everywhere. Turkey is, taking over the few pockets of the government in there, and then we have now the United Arab Emirates, and all these people are just fighting over for their strategic bases with what's happening in the Middle East, the war that's happening in Yemen and other places. So somehow we have a different phase of war that's happening in Somalia, where people like me, when I read the news every morning, waking up, news about Somalia, it just gives me, it just disappoints me. Because there's no tiny piece of evidence that things are getting back to normal. It seems like there's an entire generation that were born outside, probably the second generation now, some of them don't even speak Somali. So they completely lost their identity, and they're moving forward with whatever they have. And I would say we're on average 10 million people, and I would say half of the entire nation is not within the borders of Somalia. They're everywhere. Like if you go to China, you can see Somali refugees somewhere. So we're just this nation that's scattered all over the place. And if you see the number of refugees that are crossing the Sahara Desert, the oceans going into Europe, Somalis can be over 30% of those, people riding the boats. So yeah.
I've been a foreign student since 1995. I came from Trinidad and Tobago, and I have an extensive background. I went to Howard University. I have a degree in accounting. I did a law degree also in Columbia University in New York City. What do you think we can do as foreigners to change the perception of people that live here about why we come here? And because most people, they don't know, they haven't traveled to where we're from. We've traveled to where they're from, but they haven't traveled to where we're from. So I think, what would you do to bring a light on folks who haven't traveled, so they can understand why we do the things we do, or why we have a desire to come to a bigger country to do things better? Most of the time, foreign countries, the economic background is small, and there's only one limit to the country, and you could only get so far. But when you have bigger aspirations, you try to come to do bigger things, and obviously most people want to come to America because it's all they know sometimes. So what would you do to have people, to broaden people's minds about where we all come from and why we come here?
Right. That's a very interesting question. You're a student.
I've been a foreign student since 1995. I came.
There you go.
Before.
So that's interesting, isn't it? So look at this young man. I mean, he's offering, right? He's here, and America provides this education opportunity, and he took advantage of that. But he's a taxpayer. That's the way I see it. You're working, you're paying taxes. But the question of, some people are there's a difference between immigrant and refugees. He's an immigrant. He came here from a country that's not a war torn, but he's just looking for the opportunity, economic opportunity, to get here. And there's the refugees who are, on top of everything else, looking for safety. And then once they find that, they can move forward and find other, take advantage of other opportunities. The good thing about America is you come here and you're like everybody else. I mean, they don't call you they don't give you a refugee ID. The U.S. doesn't provide that. If you go to other countries, cross from Somalia into Kenya, or from Syria to Turkey, they just give you a refugee ID, which is that's what you have, and it's permanent. It doesn't matter how long you're in the country, 50 years, 60 years, it's not gonna change from a refugee ID to a citizenship. So that is one wonderful thing that the U.S. is providing. Once you get here, if your asylum is accepted or no, but the good thing is you can go to school and you can be part of the community, and somehow the asylum program is a program that's run by the U.S. and it's congressionally approved the way I see it, and it means they will talk to you and you have to prove that you have been through a tough time, and the reason that you can't go back to your country not only because of the war but because of lack of opportunities, and somehow they will be able to approve your case. I mean, that makes I have some friends that are from peaceful African countries, but they sought asylum and somehow they got it. We could talk to them how they did that, but you can explain yourself why you don't want to really go back to your country. Maybe you're educated, from Howard, but you don't want to go back and end up not finding a job. Well, our stories are a little bit different. Like, none of my family is here, so I'm the only one. So you can understand the pressure that I have economically. The money that I make, half of that goes back home. And my mom is in the war zone. They're not allowing me to bring her here now because I'm still a green card holder. And they asked me to wait until I become a citizen, and then I will be able to, file an application to bring her over here.
So thank you for sharing your amazing story. You're a great communicator. I don't know how Arnold Schwarzenegger taught you to speak English, but somehow he did. So your story has such resilience and just being a survivor that just astounds me that you're here. And I'm very grateful that you're here. I think you have a bright future. I hope it's in politics. You could do a lot of things, but you could really do our country a favor by being the face of immigration. Our country is born from immigrants, and we've periodically gone through history of fear of the unknown and closing the doors and then opening the doors. We're in one of those periods where we're closing the doors, driven by fear, I think. And unfortunately, our leadership encourages that fear and stokes it. So you are the antidote to that fear because of your story, and I think people can relate to you. So I wish it could get to a wider audience. Maybe this book tour will give you an opportunity to do that. So I'm just sad that the travel ban. I'm just thinking. This is a question. Could you ever go back to Somalia and return here, or is the travel ban complete and total? Do you know?
The travel ban happened today. I haven't read what's in there.
But is it?
I was just all over the place.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not going back now. I have a green card. Legally, I can go back because I have a green card. But then going back to Somalia is another red flag, because they're just wondering what you were doing over there.
Why are you going back?
And now every dollar that we send back home is screened by the U.S. government. They're wondering if we're supporting al-Shabaab or Islamic terrorists. So that's what we go through every time we're trying to send money back to our families. And at some point, the U.S. government had completely stopped the money that goes back there. And then what happened? Thousands of people were starving, because that's how, the economy, there's nothing else that people are doing. They're, living on the amount of money that we're sending, the community is sending from countries like the U.S. and Canada back home. So I'm not really feeling comfortable trying to even get into Canada. No, I'm not gonna get on that flight to go anywhere right now.
Yeah.
And with this travel ban right now, I mean, I'm just scared if I would be able to go back to Maine. But it's a local flight, and I hope everything goes okay.
Right.
But I mean, I'm so confused because I agree with you. My story is a counter narrative of what he's saying. You know, the moving population, the president himself, the moving population, he calls them many names, including invaders, invasion, infestation, animals. You know, so it makes you think if you are his supporter or if you have some sort of hesitation of like if you have never met an immigrant, you would definitely believe what he's trying to say. But then if for those of us who have been through this thing, we're not rapists, we're not invaders, we're just people who are looking for safety. And America is a great country that has to happen to be that place where we could come, settle down, and breathe, and then start a life. So that's most important why we're coming here.
And that's the reason the president's grandfather came to this country and his wife came to this country. So I guess he shares that in common with all the immigrants.
But why is he doing that? Yeah, thank you so much. That was great.
Hi, I have two quick comments and one question. One thing about the travel ban, if it doesn't affect, so if you were to go back to Somalia, but now would be a problem, but once you get citizenship, if you go back, you can still come back here. It's not about where you're flying from, it's about what your nationality is. So for example, if I was in Chad or if I was in Sudan, I could also come back, you know, and just as you would be once you get citizenship. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that because I work in asylum and refugee law, you can get asylum from any country. It's not only countries that are in war or in turmoil, but it has to do with 5 particular reasons. You have to be persecuted, and your country is either unwilling or unable to protect you. So it doesn't have to be, just to clarify, so it doesn't have to be a country that's at war, like Jamaica, for example. A lot of LGBTI refugees say they're unsafe in Jamaica, and it, you know, I mean, I don't know all the details of the situation there, but just to say that you can be a refugee from any country, like you said. You could be a refugee from Nigeria. You could be a refugee from, you know, Botswana, if you meet certain criteria as to why you left. And then finally, my question is, I might have missed some of your details of your story, but my question is, yes, well, I'm excited by it now that I'm here. But all that being said, you mentioned something when I came in about your brother. You know, you joined your brother in Kenya, so I'm just curious, were you in Dadaab, Kakuma? Do you still have family there? Are you communicating with them? How's that going? And yeah, that's it.
So who has been to Dadaab? Wow. So there you go. So you know what Dadaab looks like.
I do.
It's a flat land, it's a desert, but then it's the size of what?
You know, 400,000 people.
Yeah.
Maybe Mark knows better.
Yeah, but it's larger than Washington, D.C. It's much larger than Washington, D.C. So we're talking about an entire city, which turns into a country. And the Kenyans are not allowing these people to build a permanent structure. So there are refugees stuck in there, and the Kenyans are so confused. They want them there because the humanitarian agencies are coming and providing food, and somehow they get money that way. And they don't want kick all the refugees out of the country. So no, I did not. I just passed through there.
And then went to Nairobi.
On my way to Nairobi.
Oh, okay.
And I went there actually another time when I felt like nothing was happening in Nairobi because we don't get assistance from the United Nations. And the only way you can get assistance is to go back to the camps and register yourself. And every week they just give you, you know, a small portion of rations with the money that you guys have provided, because the money that the United Nations feeds to the refugees is the tax dollar that everyone in the U.S. is giving, you know. So, anyways, it was harsh. It was incredibly a place that I could never think of leaving. But the people who decided to stay and live there were people who gave up on all hopes and decided that it might take 20 years, but there's a process called resettlement where you might be able to be picked up by either the U.S. or Sweden or other countries, and then that's what they have been waiting for. But to my brother and I, we're just 2 young men, and the process could still happen. But we decided to just come back to Nairobi and start hawking, selling socks and hats on the streets and make some money that way.
Where is your brother now? I'm just curious.
Well, I have some good news and some bad news.
Okay.
Well, first thing is he's still in Nairobi. Once I left, he married, and then he got twins. The U.S. has sent him a final denial letter where they say you're done. And that was after 1 week when the White House introduced the travel ban. So in this case, he was given a letter that says, don't even try again. So that was done. He gave up on the US. There's a group of Team Abdi. I don't know if you were here when I talked about that team. It's like 8 people.
Oh, yeah.
They changed their name into Team Hassan, and Hassan is my brother's name. And then what we did, and I was among them, so we became 9, 8 plus 1. So we raised money, $28,000, and applied for a Canadian process for him through a refugee agency, and he was accepted. So he's gonna be in Toronto pretty soon. So
Thank you.
that's a great thing. I'm not sure if I still can do it. I don't think I want to do that now. Yeah, I'll be freaked out.
Hi.
Hello.
Just bouncing off of what she said earlier, I'm a American citizen, but just because you are an American citizen doesn't mean you can't be intimidated when you're leaving the US. I've grown up here, and in traveling to London, I've been like pulled aside for 40 minutes for whatever reason, but that doesn't keep you safe. That's what I was gonna say. But first off, I wanted to thank you for writing this book. There's not enough literature on Somali, and just we're, as a second generation Somali, it's hard to feel connected to your culture. So I wanted to also bounce off the other gentleman who spoke earlier about preserving culture, and if you have any recommendations on like literature or how you keep connected to Somalia while you're here, instead of, as you come into the US, it's a salad, but it's a melting pot. You get washed out a little bit as the years go by and as the generations move on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I totally understand that. Yeah. I mean, Somalis have been fleeing our country since 1991. So I'm assuming that your parents was one of those first generation that moved out and somehow stranded in the refugee camps, and then you were born here. We actually left before the war. Oh, you okay? I don't know why you did that. I don't know why you did that, but it makes sense. Probably running away from the dictatorship or whatever. But that's exactly what she's just saying. Is exactly what my mother is asking me on the phone every day. She's like, "What happens to your kids if you get married?" And I'm like, "They will be American." And actually, I'm gonna accept that because that's the reality. And for now, we're homeless. I mean, you can't go back to the country of your mother because it's still, there's so many bad things that could happen to you. And I left Somalia 2011, pretty short time. And I've been stranded in Kenya for 4 years as a refugee. But still, I remember things vividly and everything that happened, the wars and all of that. And my mother's there, my sister's there, and my sister's married and has kids. And they're living in this life, and I totally understand every street that they are, moving to whenever the war happens. They move to a different place. But would I go back? I kind of think every night, I have nightmares, and I'm still dreaming in Somali, which is funny, because I haven't still started dreaming in English. And a friend I have told me, once you start dreaming in English, that's when you become an American. I'm still waiting for that to happen. Might be tonight, who knows? And I will wake up in the morning running all over the place, which is funny because you already have that privilege. So, yeah, I'm like standing in the middle of this intersection, and I see the communities. I'm an interpreter in Maine, and some of the people that I help are people who have been here for 20 years, including people at the same age as my mother, but they haven't even bothered learning one word of English. And when I talk to them, I realize that there's a feeling that they're here temporarily, even though they're citizens. So I believe one day there's going to be peace. And they've been saying this for the last 20 years, and it hadn't happened, unfortunately. And so what happens to them? They completely accept their kids to assimilate because there's no way that you can avoid that. You have to send your kid to the school, and the school is teaching English. It's not teaching the native language where your mother speaks. So in this case, you spend all day with a class of these white kids running all over the place, or Latinos or whatever, and you guys speak English, and you come home, and then in a few months, you start yelling in the house with English words, and mom yells back in Somali, and somehow you understand each other, and you communicate. And that's what I observe in the community And I'm like, this is really funny, and I laugh. And then at some point, I realized how this identity is completely losing. You know, it's just disappearing. So what's happening is some sort of revolution of what happened to America when the Irish, Italians, all these people, ask these white people. Their great-grandfathers were from Scotland, Ireland, right? And there you go. Who are you today? Americans. So that's what happened. It's not a bad thing. I mean, I totally understand. How do we do that? I mean, well, we're living in the world of technology today. You know, just look at the example of is there an Indian or Chinese in the house? So what they do is wonderful. They bring their kids here, go into school, and then summer breaks, they go back home. And what do? They just learn the culture, the tradition, and they go to these famous places in their countries like the Taj Mahal, the China Wall, and all of. So they somehow get connected to their country, and they see how the country is developing technologically, economically, and everything else. And then the parents actually speak English. And for those who don't, at least know how to communicate. And then somehow they're able to get the kids start, speaking that. And then we have the salad growing up in this case. For us, the worst problem is we can't send our kids back to Somalia because it's not safe. So what other options do we have? I have no answer to that question.
Okay, so I'm Nigerian American. I was born in Nigeria, but I actually grew up in Southern Maryland. So I knew no other Africans, let alone any other Nigerians, let alone barely any Black people. And so it wasn't until I got to university where I finally started meeting other 1.5 generation Africans. So 1.5 generation is people who came here like 7 and under, 10 and under, people like that. And so my thing to you for those who can't go back is just surround yourself with a community of people who love your culture, know your culture, and want to share your culture. And so now that I'm like grown and can kind of pick and choose my friends, I have a lot more friends in the DC area. It's one of the reasons why I joined the Young African Professionals, to meet other people who want to learn about and uplift our cultures back home. And so, like, for example, I used to joke about how I was not hip at all with any of the Nigerian music until college, and then I started learning about Azonto and P Square and all those people, because that's not what my parents know. My parents
do you watch Nollywood movies?
Not that much actually, because the Nollywood movies in my house.
It's the third largest movie production company.
It
in the
is,
world.
yes, it's very true. But all the Nollywood movies in my house are the super old ones. It's not the new ones nowadays, Jennifer and things like that are hip. But yeah, so my thing to you would just be to surround yourself with the people.
It's a great advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And so I guess while I'm here, I had a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for this amazing book. And I have noticed a pattern in your in the story that you're telling about telling your story. So you started first, with the cell phone, and then you went on to do the This American Life. And so I guess. Okay, so also, just to give you a little context, I'm coming from the African Trade and Global Investment Summit that happened inside DC, at the Ronald Reagan building. And one of the topics that came up often was the importance of Africans telling our own stories, right? So for so long, people have told us the story of Africa. We believe it, we ingest it, whatever. And so this idea of Africans telling our own stories is something that just came up a lot. And so when you were up here talking about it and talking about how it affected your life, tangibly, you know what I mean? I thought that was just really powerful. So I guess my question to you is, what made you decide that it was time to tell your story in book format? Because some people would have been well, I've been on NPR, cool, done, told my story, you know what I mean? But you chose to take it that one step further and tell your story in the format of a book. So I wanted to kind of get your thinking behind that. Why did you decide that was the format you wanted? And why did you decide it was time to tell it in that format? And then the follow-up question to that is, now that you've written this book, what's next?
Awesome. So before I came to the United States, I've only read few books, and one of them was called The Art of the Deal. I don't know why I did that. I did. Yeah. I know, I actually did, but he didn't become president at the time. And then to me, everything that is made in America was American. So that's how I saw it. And now I look back and I'm like, everything he told me is a lie, you know. So, well, you know, I'm a natural storyteller. And it was not only This American Life, but it all began when I met Paul Salpic on the streets of Mogadishu. And we met, and for the first time ever, I was able to practice my English with him, asking, do you have a Pepsi Cola? And he gives me, and do you have some more? And then he says, well, you have some sense of humor, and you have a story. And he publishes my story. And he started emailing me back and forth, and he says, send me updates of what's happening in Mogadishu. I wasn't going to school. I didn't have any other thing to do. My entire world was just put together exactly what was happening in the environment at the time, and which was very simple. I was writing email, and there's a bomb. I look through the window, and someone is over there, running away with a broken bone or whatever. And then so that was kind of how my story was. It was just happening specifically at that specific time. And Paul collected all the emails that I sent him, and he sent it to everywhere. And he's the one who actually kind of told me, well, it seems like you're really a wonderful storyteller. And where it comes from is, for those of you, we Somalis are storytellers. And my mom, I have a chapter here where my mom talks about her animals. And she names every single one of them, hundreds of animals. And she tells me the stories of what every star stands for, the land, the grazing animals, and how the nomadic life works, and the engagement, the weddings, everything else. So somehow I kind of have that feeling from her where I could tell the stories exactly as it was happening. But when I came to Maine, interestingly enough, and I ended up doing an installation job, and I was paid $11 an hour, working from 6 to 6, and super excited. And This American Life puts together this story, and the story goes out, and people listen to it, and I receive messages on my Facebook, people saying, that was a wonderful story. And then at the end, they had questions. What do you feel now? What was it like growing up? And then I couldn't answer all of the questions to every individual. And then at one point, I get a phone call from This American Life themselves saying like, we got people who are really interested in a book. Yeah, that's what they said. Because This American Life, they talk to agents and publishers and all that stuff. So they somehow got some connects. And then that's when I got into this world of like how publishing works, how this thing works. And I said, I'm ready to do that. And I called my mother about all the childhood stories because it's hard to remember every detail back home. But then with the help of mom's vivid memories, it was easy for me to put together the stories of what happened when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, and a little bit above. And that's how it worked. This is a nonfiction. It's a memoir. It's my story, and somehow it's not hard. The hardest part of writing the book was the translation, because I'm thinking in a language other than English, and then I write something, and I look what I wrote, and I look at my thinking. Somehow it doesn't really convey the message. And then I went to go back and forth. So I remember staying up nights, going to Starbucks several times a day and just ordering coffee, sitting there, and I could just go to whatever libraries in the area. So that's how my book came together. So what's next? A movie. Yeah. We're working on a movie out of this book. So, which is a great thing. And I'm trying to get into the movie. But they dictate. I hope so. I'm ready. Yeah.
Sure. So I had a question about the date of birth that you picked.
Okay.
So I'm also from Somalia, and I lived in a refugee camp for 2 years prior to me being resettled in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And so, like every other refugee, my parents didn't know the birthday. Mm-hmm. And so when I do ask her, when was I born? She describes, like your mother did, the weather or the stars. And I'm like,
it was a hot
great,
day.
Mom. But what was the date?
And every day is
so
hot
those
day.
are the things that are important to our family and our Somalis. So what made you pick June 20th? And did you know that that's World Refugee Day? Mm-hmm. Is that why you picked it?
What? Yes. I actually, that was the reason. I was discussing with my brother, and I said, and we were refugees. This is in Kenya when I actually was thinking of this, but they didn't let me write down that. June 20th is my birthday. June 21st is my brother's birthday. Just one day apart. And now I was telling him, because you come to Canada, so you have to have a different time. And I was asking him to change his birthday because we need to have 2 different cakes. Because we can't eat a cake tonight and then the next night. So, I mean, most importantly, I was trying to be professional. I was trying to be someone who I taught myself English so I can be like anybody else. So I don't want to stick with January 1, where it's like, if you were my Facebook friend, and if I was January 1, you would probably find 800 friends that are born on the same day. So you don't know how to say happy birthday to all of them.
You just send a mass email.
Right. So yeah, totally understand. My mother doesn't care about it. She doesn't know when she was born, but she tells me, like you said, it was a hot day, and I'm like, every day is a hot day. So yeah.
Abdi, thank you so much for telling this story that's not about pirates and
Black Hawk Down.
al-Shabaab. I truly appreciate it. And just to add to that, I also love when I heard the first time they ask you to fill a form and you have to find a place to put, and you like, because the first time I saw it, I was like, well, maybe I was disappointed because I didn't see my tribe in there.
Right.
But people who cannot understand it, I never heard of identifying yourself, although everybody over there is, because homogeneous and everybody looks like, but nobody thinks about color in terms of what color are you, what ethnic you are. So that was really a shocker for me. The one thing I have to say to follow what the young Somali American was saying is in terms of going back or connecting to the culture, although there are some violent areas, but there are, my brother just took his family this summer to parts of Somaliland and Hargeisa, and I know, I was talking to a friend who just came back from Puntland, Bosaso. She actually moved from America to Bosaso to open a clinic there, and she's a medical doctor. So there are areas that are peaceful that you can take your children to and the family to. It might not be your hometown where you're from, but there are other parts of the country that where people go to and are relatively safe. And the way, and one summer I sent my son back home to my sister who was going there to Somaliland, Hargeisa, and when he came back, he was completely changed. I had this perspective. Before, everything was about the game and buy this, but when I say now I'm sending money to someone, it's like, oh no, Daddy, earn my $20 too, so they can really learn from, and I have appreciation for what they have here. And the last thing I want to say is about the Somalis, because you always hear about the pirates and about the terrorism, but what I want you to know about the Somalis, to add to your story, is Somalis are extremely resilient people, extremely proud people, extremely entrepreneurial people. So if you go even in Kenya, if you go, the Eastleigh, where they went refugees, I know everybody goes there to shop now. They start with a little tea shop, and the next thing you know, he has a big store. From South Africa to Uganda, even in the United States, the places Somalis refugees went, even Maine, you came from Maine. When the first Somalis went to Maine, the mayor wrote a letter public saying, you are not welcome here, you are, so on and so forth. Now they took over that whole area, transformed the community, opened a store after a store. Same thing in Seattle, Washington, same thing in Columbus, Ohio, same thing in Minnesota. Extremely entrepreneurial people, extremely resilient people. And Somalis will be back. And that's already happening. But the news is focusing on the violence, on that. And I'm not saying there's no problem, but I'm very confident that the Somalis will be back. And what a lot of Americans who have an encounter with the Somalis are, we're almost like the Irish of Africa. We're extremely resilient people, extremely entrepreneurial, like you say, oral society, a lot of potential society. So Somalis will be back.
Right.
It's already starting, and I'm very hopeful about that.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Our sister was asking, remember that question? She said she was born here and her mom somehow displaced from Somalia. And she was trying to ask me if there's a hope that something is going to happen in Somalia. But I have been there until 2011. And as a child, as a teenager, as in my 20s, it's hard to find the opportunity. It seems like year after year, we had a generation that was growing up in the war and completely, the Somalis within Somalia are completely somehow disconnected from how the rest of the world works. But then Somalis outside of Somalia are getting connected to the rest of the world and somehow kind of trying to help the communities in Somalia. But we have political crisis. It's everywhere. I mean, there's a president, and the president is from Buffalo, New York, and he's an American citizen, and he was a great prime minister at some point, and now, he's the president of Somalia for over a year, but he can't even, pacify the entire capital city of Mogadishu. And it's not because he doesn't have enough military strength or he doesn't have enough cabinet members. It's just the society, the population are completely disappointed in everything that comes because they have seen so many different governments that came in and were not able to help. So they somehow feel like, let us alone. This is how life works. We're getting used to it. We're dressed up. We're going. They go to Lido Beach and other places. So if you look at images that are coming from Mogadishu, it's completely two different images. You see the completely destroyed side of the city, and then you see this thriving area where the Turkeys have built some military bases. The U.S. is there on the boots and other places. So in this small area is where there's a heavily guarded zone, and then civilians can somehow go and enjoy a few moments and then leave. But then there's the majority of the problem is coming from the radical Islamists that are actually targeting anybody, in the city, as long as you're not with them. So as long as you're not with them, they're going to kill you. So that's a problem. That's what scares people. So they don't want to associate with the government because they know that there will be, nobody's going to take care of their or guarantee their security. So they're going to die anyway. So they just try to disassociate from the government, but somehow they're ready and prepared for peace. That's why they're going to all of these places. And there is a growing television shows that's coming from Mogadishu, which is interesting, really, that you can watch on Universal TV. And if you watch that, it doesn't feel like Mogadishu. Mark has been there, so I used to blog for him. He works for the International Refugee. I completely agree with you.